Hi, I'm Stephanie Samuels. I'm the founder and director of CopLine.
I'm Jim Alvarez, the Vice President of the International Law Enforcement Relations from CopLine, and I retired from the Los Angeles Police Department a couple years ago as a police captain, and I'm glad to be here.
So some of the stuff that we wanted to address was what's going on in the nation and the short-term effects that we're seeing, the long-term effects that we're anticipating, the importance of being able to have confidential help available to all law enforcement officers and their families, being able to reduce the stigma, to make sure that people that are struggling with the various psychosocial stressors understand what's going on and are able to get the help that they need. So I wanted to address it. I am a clinician. I work in private practice. CopLine was my pay forward for an amazing population that I've been blessed to be able to see for upwards of a little over 30 years now. And I would say that they had a really difficult job. Been dealing with a lot of different stressors throughout my entire career. In the past 4 months, it's been unprecedented. Certainly first with COVID being a pandemic. It's the first time in our lifetimes that we've seen something that has really almost paralyzed a world. And with inside of 24 hours, these law enforcement officers who go in and out of houses with COVID exposures and risk their own lives, and quite a few of them that have died, going from being heroes to zeros. Law enforcement has never viewed themselves as being heroes. They truly only look at what they do as their job, but what they never anticipated was ever becoming the enemy.
She mentioned the COVID-19 issue currently that the officers are experiencing. So they're concerned about, are they going to catch the virus, the unknowns of the virus? Are they going to take it home to their family, to their kids? So the level of stress, anxiety, pressure has really reached a high limit right now with our officers across the nation. And they need someone to turn to. So we provide that at CopLine, the confidential, the anonymous, an outlet where they can reach out to a retired officer who is going to understand what they're going through right now. Because we had the issues before with police suicide, which is on the rise for a couple years now. Everybody knows that. It's on the forefront of every law enforcement platform. Officer wellness, mental health, resiliency training for officers. But now you throw in COVID-19, it's a whole different arena. And then you add to that the protests that officers are being faced with. Officers that weren't used to being having someone in your face with the anger, the hatred. And then on top of the protests, the anti-police sentiment. So these times are very difficult for officers, both here in the USA and in Canada. So we have an issue, and we as a resource want to be there for our officers. CopLine Now for departments in small areas or rural areas across the country that do not have that outlet, this is going to be a win-win for everybody, because the stigma is real and the fear is real with officers who are considering talking about their problems. Now we have two dynamics in place here. First, the officers do not talk about their feelings. Since day one in the police academy, they've been trained to be the saviors of society. So how dare a peacekeeper show any weakness? Because if you show weakness in the streets, then you might be exposing yourself, your partner, or even the community members to some danger. So what do officers do? They keep it all inside. So there's that fear. The other fear is the stigma of the information getting back to one's organization. Officers are driven individuals, and they visualize of finishing their 30-year career, promoting, being selected to specialized assignments. And there's a fear that if somebody finds out about their current situation, whether it's an issue, a problem, or a full-blown mental health crisis, that their career could be tainted. So that's why we need an outlet. And an outlet like CopLine, where officers can call, they don't have to tell us their names. They could immediately feel the comfort on the other side of the line with a retired officer who understands what they're going through, and they're able to release all that pressure and stress, and we can work together to find some solutions to the problems.
One of the biggest pieces that has been addressed, certainly in my practice and nationally, is not only the stigma of getting help, but what happens when somebody finds out. And what I've found with those psychologists that are doing the fitness for duties, which is really an officer's greatest fear, is, if I'm having trouble, I'm going to go for a fitness for duty. And what I've actually found is that officers that are in treatment are looked at favoritively when there's a fitness for duty. And it's logical if you think about it. And the logic is, hey, if this person's in trouble and they need help, they're getting it. That they are addressing the problem, they are being proactive, they are not being mandated. And all of that obviously is what you want for an officer, is to be healthy, to be able to deal with their problems appropriately. And as Jim was saying, to not keep them in, to not stuff them down, and not use some of the maladaptive coping mechanisms that are rampant in law enforcement, particularly with alcohol. So that stigma is part of why we're here today and why CopLine was set up. And as Jim was mentioning, we have officers from all over the country where there are no services that are available to them, and yet they can be patrolling an area size of Delaware, single patrol, no backup, and working for $12 an hour at an at-will department. So being able to have a safe place to go, to be able to talk. For those that are fortunate enough to have services available with inside of departments, and there are trusted services, that's great. We also find that a lot of times the interdepartmental services aren't trusted, and being able to give multiple resources, that's what this is about. There's not just one game. There's not one thing that works for officers.
This is truly an all-hands approach. Everybody at every level has to engage with officer wellness and the issues that officers are faced with currently. Partner officers, they have to really key in on their sixth sense, because partner officers sometimes spend more time with the officer than actually the family members. It's just the way that our business is set up with the hours that we work, the modified schedule that these officers are working in. But an officer who sees a change in their partner has to have the courage to step up and ask that officer, their partner, is everything okay? And when the response is, yeah, I'm fine, things are good and golden, then the officer has to have the same courage to say, no, this is what I'm seeing. You have anger, you're silent, your disposition has changed. So every partner officer out there has to be really paying attention to each other. We have to take care of our own. Supervisors have to be really focused on looking for those telltale signs on their employees, their officers, the group of officers that they're responsible for, and be prepared to engage at all levels with the resources that they have at their department. And if they don't have any resources, they have to reach out to outside entities, and CopLine's one of those. And of course, management. Management has to be focused on taking care of their officers with mental health programs, with resiliency training, with all the gamut of things that they have at their disposal to make sure that their organization is healthy. How can we actually expect our officers to go out in the field and deal with the community issues when they're not being addressed themselves? Their problems are not being addressed. So it's a big issue right now.
You go home, you keep everything inside. That the long-term effects of this is, I believe, that we're going to see higher divorce rates, higher suicide rates. We're going to see career-ending decisions because nobody's going to want to do this job, therefore taxing those that are still working this job even greater. When we are working at minimum manpower, which many I know of my departments are working at, that it is just, there is no time for the body and the mind to be able to recuperate and take that needed rest and downtime. And nobody can do this job, nobody can do any job 24/7, 7 days a week without a true break. You know, when Jim was talking about really tasking yourself to be the best supervisor, the best officer, truly the best human being, and loving your fellow officer without the kumbaya experience, but truly giving a shit and being able to say, well, you might be telling me that you look okay, but you don't. And even going a step beyond that, if you are an officer that is in counseling, is to be able to open up. Because what I've found that the number one way that officers come into my practice is that somebody has outed themselves and said, hey, look, there's a woman that I see. And by no means is this about, you need to see Stephanie. There's plenty of Stephanies out there. Culturally competent therapists are imperative. One of the nice things that CopLine has been doing since we've started is going after and vetting culturally competent therapists throughout this country and Canada to make sure that when we give a referral that we have personally spoken to the individual and been able to ask the questions, so we know when we give that referral that the officer will be able to speak the language that they do without having to spend hours educating somebody, because that in and of itself is really frustrating. So again, I think the responsibility comes down to you and being able to take that stigma away by being able to say, hey, look, this is what I'm doing. You worried about working with me? And as a leader of an organization, being able to put it out there that this is absolutely acceptable. There are several chiefs that I have dealt with who have told their officers when they have pulled them into their practice or into their office that they are in private practice with a clinician. Huge, 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 huge. But what we find is otherwise you get this sense of, well, this is okay for you to do, but it's not okay for me to do. Leaders lead by example. And if they don't, we're going to continue to watch the fallout of the silence that we have. And again, we are in unprecedented times. Officers now have nowhere that they feel safe. They're not being served in restaurants. They've taken down their thin blue lines for homes. They've removed anything on their vehicles. Their spouses, their children have had to be told not to wear anything with police on it. This is just, there are no words, but what there needs to be is a place for them, all of them, to be able to vent. And that's what we're here for. We're here as one of the resources that we know is confidential, and there will be no repercussions ever for making that phone call.
At CopLine, we handle all types of calls, whether it's an issue, a problem, or a full-blown crisis. We may get calls from an officer that found out his or her wife is cheating on them, so they have some marriage problems. An officer who's having some flashbacks from a critical incident they experienced, up to an officer who has survivor's remorse when they were involved in an OIS in which their partner officer was killed. We cover everything from A to Z, and because of the active listening and the training that we've received from Stephanie Samuels and our training cadre at CopLine, each retired officer on the line is prepared to provide that support to the officer that calls. And we are prepared to be on the call for 2 minutes or 2 hours, whatever it takes. We want to make sure that that caller knows that they have an outlet, they have a resource, and for that moment in their life, the worst moment that they're experiencing, that they're not alone, that they have someone to talk to, and that's why CopLine exists.
CopLine might have been a great idea, but the truth is, without the retired officers, it would have just been a great idea. The heart and soul of CopLine is not me. The heart and soul are our retired officers that are answering those lines 24/7, 7 days a week, asking nothing from anybody in return. Their gift is that phone ringing and knowing that there is somebody that trusted to make that phone call.
And we can never forget the sacrifice our officers are making daily with the modified schedules, the canceled vacations, the mandatory overtime, and they're responding to the most horrific calls in modern day in history, some of those mass shootings that have happened in our society in the recent months. We want to be able to talk to our folks and realize that they have the courage day in and day out to put that vest on and go out there and handle their calls for service to protect our communities and keeping us all safe. But they have to find the same courage to take care of themselves and make that phone call for CopLine so that we can be there to support them if they need any type of support.
That is the key. The key is just for them to know you're never alone.
Now, every profession has people suffering in silence, and so law enforcement is no different. So we can't let the shiny badge or the pressed uniform and the clean boots fool anybody. Our officers out there are suffering. They have some significant issues. They're raw and they're real. Find the courage that you have to suit up every day to make that phone call. 1-800-COPLINE. and reach out for support. We want to try and merge you with a mental health professional if that's what you're looking for, if that's what you need, because we have to take care of ourselves. And we have to remember that suffering in silence is unacceptable.